And Madam Speaker, obviously we're dealing with such a crisis on the front lines, from medical workers to EMTs to police. You see in New York City what will fan out to other cities where they have a lack of staffing because literally those on the front lines are getting sick. And so there will be questions about actually society functioning as we move forward. Big picture, are you concerned at all about preserving our election process?
Well, before I go to the election, let me just say that yesterday we had a day dedicated to personal protective equipment and ventilators and the rest. We had over 100 reporters on a call with Chairman Pallone and Chairman Scott, the two committees of jurisdiction that deal with this. We had an couple of hours long conversation with our full House Democratic caucus, and it just focusing on how we get this equipment to these workers who are risking their lives, their hearts are breaking for what they see, but they also know that they're at risk. How would you like it, any of us like it, if one of our loved ones was in this situation where they needed care and they were diagnosed, and the doctor or the nurse or whoever, the healthcare professional who was dealing with them, was using equipment for the fourth patient in a row when you should only be using it on one patient in terms of gloves and gowns and the rest. So again, this is in the immediate now that has to happen, and it has to happen with recognition of that need. And I feel so sad about what's happening in New York and my own state of California, but New York being the center of it all right now. And I salute Governor Cuomo for his outspoken challenge to the conscience of all of us to get that equipment there. In terms of the elections, I think that we'll probably be moving to vote by mail. That's why we wanted to have more resources in this third bill that just was signed by the president to get those resources to the states to facilitate the reality of life. That we are going to have more vote by mail, and would hope that we would have also some funding, which was rejected, for the Postal Service, which will implement the vote by mail, as well as implementing right now, getting equipment to where it needs to be when it needs to be by mail. But again, our election system, the integrity of the election system is central to our democracy. How anyone could oppose our enabling the states to have vote by mail raises so many other questions. But let's just be hopeful and have public opinion weigh in on that.
Well, I was going to bring that up with you. Joe Scarborough here. I was going to bring that up with you. The President of the United States said in a TV interview yesterday that if vote by mail was allowed and if more Americans were allowed to vote, he said Republicans would never be elected again. Were you surprised that the president would make such an admission that if we allowed Americans to vote safely and in high numbers, that there wouldn't be a Republican ever elected again?
Well, nothing surprises me about what the president said, but as I say, let's not go there. But I certainly, I believe that the Republican Party is a grand old party. I say to my Republican friends, and I do have some, take back your party. I think that that's necessary for our country, for us to have a strong Republican Party. And I feel sad that the president doesn't have confidence that his party cannot convince the American people about a path to go forward. But that's what elections are about. What is your vision for the future? What do you know about our challenges? How strategic are you to get the job done? How do you connect with the kitchen table needs of the American people? That's the vitality of a democracy. Having disagreements is part of that. Our founders certainly had their disagreements, but I feel sad that the president doesn't have confidence in his own party that vote by mail would deter any future elections. No, I don't think that's the case.
We have Willie Geist with us, safely socially distanced, and he has the next question for you, Madam Speaker.
Hi, Willie. Good morning.
Speaker Pelosi, we appreciate your time. Good morning to you as well. We've obviously, for the last weeks, several weeks, cataloged the failures of the White House, the failures of the president, the failures to take seriously what is now obviously a pandemic and a crisis in cities across the country. But the good news is we live in a federal government with equal branches of government, and your body has great power as well. So as you look back on the last, say, 3 months or so, do you believe that you all in Congress should have moved quicker? Do you take any responsibility for the slow response?
No, not at all. We have, first of all, we had hoped that there would be leadership from the White House because the president has to sign the bill. But we've had, as I say, 3 very strong bills that we have passed in a very positive way, again, addressing the shortcomings that we saw. Testing, testing, testing. That was the theme of our first legislation way back when. I do think that as we go into this 4th bill, that it will be important for us, for the Republicans, to recognize the challenge that is out there. Again, in these bills, when you're the country has a Republican president and a Republican Senate and a Democratic House, you have to make your compromises. But I feel very proud about the work that we did, the speed with which we did it, the bipartisanship that was the hallmark of it all. But that also means that compromises were made. I hope that in this next bill that we will be able to address the concerns of our state and local governments. That is absolutely essential. We need to do more. We need to do more by way of our appropriations, by way of our tax code, and by way of policy, and also by way of the Fed doing more to help the state and local governments with the challenges that they face, which are massive. We have to do more. Well, you want me to give you the list of what we would have in a new bill, but no, I think that Congress has been a very positive force in this. But again, we can only go as fast as the signature. And I feel very sad that there was no recognition, no respect for science right from the start. But again, Willie, I really think that what we have to do is go forward after what we can have, as we would always do, an after-action review about what worked and what didn't work. But I do think that rather than spending time on the president because he will say and do what he does, we cannot be limited by that. We must be, again, guided by science. We said from the start we must have a government-wide, evidence-based, science-based, coordinated way to go forward. If we had had that from the start, emanating from the White House, and again, I respect Dr. Fauci. I've worshipped him at his shrine for over 30 years, but I just don't know why the scientists did not have more sway much earlier on in terms of the president. It certainly, science certainly had its impact on the Congress from day one.
And Speaker Pelosi, one more question for you, just on a personal note. One of your colleagues, Congresswoman Velasquez, says she believes she's tested positive for coronavirus, at least has all the symptoms there. You were at a bill signing with her not long ago. She spoke on the floor of the House. Will you get a coronavirus test? Do you have any concerns for your own health?
No, and I'm not sure she had a test. I think that she spoke to the doctor and she described her symptoms. And he advised her directly, but she has that in her own a tweet or however she put it out. In terms of my situation, I kept my distance. I said, we all had to be 6 feet apart, and I kept my distance from all the members. And at the signing, you will see a great distinction between our signing and the president's. We had a bipartisan signing enrollment ceremony in the House. With the Republican leader and leaders on the committees of jurisdiction there. We were very, very spaced in the room. That we took a bigger room so that we could have more space among us. And if you look at the picture, you'll see that the Congresswoman is well in her own space in that picture. So when I called the doctor, I said, this is, what we have experienced, and he said, your situation is low risk and you have no reason to take on any measures because you just weren't. If you had lunch for 2 hours and spoke, it's a completely different thing than being in the same room, spaced the way we were. I think I was very proud of us, of the Congress, because, we had that nuisance challenge about, well, we have a quorum and the rest. I knew we'd have a quorum. I knew we'd pass the bill by voice vote. I knew it would be strongly bipartisan. Leader McCarthy and I worked closely on that with our leader, Mr. Hoyer, Mr. Clyburn, our whip, and others, to be sure that we had what we needed to remove all doubt that the bill would pass. But in order to do so, and following the guidance of our Sergeant-at-Arms and our Capitol physician, we needed to be 6 feet apart from each other. And so it was really an historic picture to see the Congress with over 250 members spaced 6 feet apart in the chamber and in the gallery. And it took like 1 minute. I said to the colleague in question, my thinking is that his 15 minutes of fame would be 1 minute of shame, because this was going to be over very quickly, and we could abide by the guidance of the Sergeant-at-Arms and the Capitol physician, and at the same time have a voice vote, very bipartisan, to get the job done in a way that could quickly meet the needs of the American people in terms of their lives and their livelihoods. But now we have to do more.
Speaking of bipartisanship, the president has said that you and he have not spoken with each other in quite some time. Would you like to speak with the president of the United States in this time of a pandemic? Would you like to begin communicating with him on a regular basis again? And if so, how do we get from where we are to that point for the sake of the American people?
Well, I've always spoken to presidents on an as-needed basis. It's an historic occasion when the Speaker and the President speak. It's history. What is the purpose and what is the urgency? So he tasked his people to negotiate with us on the legislation, and we respect that. I did that with President Bush as well. He would say, this person speaks for me, this cabinet officer or whatever. Actually, under President Bush, it was more of a reality than it was this time. But nonetheless, with the urgency and the purpose, we were able to do that. You ignore the fact that I was there for the State of the Union address. People say, well, you haven't spoken to him since October. No, we were there for the State of the Union address. You remember that. But again, if it's necessary, I'm sure we will speak. But at this time, since we're basing what we're doing on evidence, science, the needs of the American people, we, again, in the Congress are 2 different parties in the House and the Senate, and our negotiations, plus the involvement of the president's representative as to what he would sign, as long as that gets the job done, I think that's fine. I don't know what I would learn in a conversation with the president. We speak to each other right now, and that's what he really hears, what people say publicly, much more than what you might say in a call. And I think that those should be public anyway, so everybody knows what actually happened in the conversation.
That is for sure. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, thank you so much. We are praying for the president. We're praying for you, and we thank you so much for your service and for being on this morning.
I appreciate that. And prayer, prayer, prayer. So I always say science is an answer to our prayers. So we need both. And as we go into Holy Week next week, we'll have it'll be a sadder time for us as lives are lost. But we have to be hopeful and pray for a better future. And I thank you for bringing that up. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for your leadership, Speaker Pelosi. Be safe. Willie Geist, your thoughts on the Speaker?
Well, I thought Speaker Pelosi, clearly she wants a fourth piece of legislative relief here going forward. She views the first three as sort of steps along the way to another one that she's going to be working on. Also, I noted several times when she was asked by you and Mika about her sort of approach with Donald Trump, she wanted to turn the corner and look forward, which is obviously a marked change from her line a couple of days ago where she said people are dying while the president fiddles, which obviously is looking backward about his sort of ignorance of the problem or unwillingness to confront the problem over the last several months. She kept saying, we don't have time for that. There will be an after-action report. Let's look forward right now. And hopefully that's everyone's posture at the moment.
Well, and you'll also note, Mika, something that she talked about speaking to the president by phone, something that we've learned that often it just doesn't take. You say one thing one day, and the next day things change dramatically, and it's almost like the conversation was forgotten. But I do hope that both leaders can temper their remarks moving forward. And there's no moral equivocation. I know the president attacks the speaker more, but at this point, I'm just saying we really do hope for bipartisanship as we move forward, and that is the responsibility primarily of the President of the United States. But we certainly hope that our leaders can at least speak to each other, Mika, in this time of pandemic, because we are a nation at war, and we all, as the speaker said, we all need to come together.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.